Hi, K-pop lovers. Welcome back to our channel. Picture this, 7 young men from South Korea, starting from a small entertainment company that was on the verge of bankruptcy, became a cultural phenomenon worth billions of dollars and transformed an entire industry. This is not a fairy tale. This is the story of BTS, and how they didn't just break records, they shattered the entire system. In 2019 alone, Forbes reported that BTS generated approximately $170 million in annual revenue through music, merchandise, endorsements, and digital content. But here's what makes this even more mind-blowing. Their label, Big Hit Entertainment, reported revenues of $508 million that same year, with BTS being responsible for 95% of that income. To put this in perspective, BTS's contribution to South Korea's economy in 2018 was estimated at $4.65 billion, accounting for 0.3% of the entire nation's GDP. That's comparable to major corporations like Korean Air. A boy band contributing as much to a country's economy as an international airline company. Let that sink in. But the money is just the surface. What BTS did to K-pop is far more revolutionary than any number on a balance sheet. Before we dive into how they made this fortune, we need to understand where they came from, because that context makes their success even more incredible. When BTS debuted in June 2013, they weren't from the big 3 entertainment companies that dominated K-pop. They came from Big Hit Entertainment, a company so small it was almost unknown. Their debut showcase had fewer than 100 people in attendance. Other K-pop groups from bigger companies were selling out 1,000-seat venues on day one. BTS had to fight for every single fan. The traditional K-pop model was already established. Take young trainees, put them through years of intensive training in singing, dancing, and foreign languages, then debut them with manufactured images and songs written by in-house producers. The companies controlled everything, from the music to the public image to the relationships. The idols were products, polished and perfect but distant. BTS broke this mold completely. From the beginning, BTS was different. The members were involved in writing and producing their own music. RM, Suga, and J-Hope came from underground hip-hop backgrounds and brought raw, authentic storytelling to their lyrics. They weren't singing about superficial romance or party anthems. They were talking about mental health, societal pressure, the struggle of youth, self-love, and finding your identity in a world that constantly tells you who you should be. Their second mini-album in 2014 featured songs criticizing the Korean education system and the pressure put on students. Can you imagine a mainstream pop group doing that? But it worked, because millions of young people around the world felt seen for the first time. They found artists who understood their pain, their anxiety, their dreams. This authenticity became BTS's superpower, but it was their connection with fans that turned them into a global phenomenon. While other K-pop groups maintained a professional distance, BTS broke down the walls entirely. They started blogging before their debut, sharing their daily lives, their struggles, their vulnerabilities. They created a reality show called Bangtan Bomb, uploading hundreds of behind-the-scenes videos showing them goofing around, practicing, eating, just being themselves. No scripts, no heavy editing, just 7 young men being human. This created something unprecedented: the ARMY, arguably the most powerful fandom in music history. And here's where the business genius comes in. BTS and Big Hit understood something that traditional entertainment companies missed. In the digital age, fans don't just want to consume content, they want to participate. They want to feel like they're part of the journey. So BTS gave them that. The ARMY became more than fans, they became partners in BTS's success. They translated videos into dozens of languages without being asked. They organized streaming parties to boost song rankings. They created fan theories about music video symbolism. They funded billboard advertisements in Times Square with their own money. They made BTS trend on Twitter so consistently that the platform gave BTS their own emoji in 2016, a first for any artist. This fan engagement translated directly into commercial success. When BTS released their Love Yourself series between 2017 and 2018, something unprecedented happened. The album Map of the Soul, Persona, released in 2019, sold 3.72 million copies according to JN Charts, the official Korean music tracking system. In an era when physical album sales were declining globally, BTS was moving millions of units. But it wasn't just album sales. Their Love Yourself World Tour in 2019 generated $170 million in touring revenue alone, according to Celebrity Net Worth. To put that in context, that's more than most Hollywood blockbuster movies make at the box office. They sold out stadiums across 4 continents, including Wembley Stadium in London and Citi Field in New York, becoming the first Korean act to perform at a US stadium. In 2019, Forbes ranked BTS 43rd on their Celebrity 100 list with earnings of $57 million, making them one of the highest-paid celebrities in the world. Each member earned approximately $7 million that year. And remember, this was just from their group activities. The solo projects and individual endorsements would come later. Their merchandise sales were astronomical. Everything from light sticks to clothing lines to dolls sold out within minutes. When they released a limited edition meal with McDonald's in 2021, fans waited in line for hours. Stores ran out of the special packaging on the first day. When Samsung partnered with BTS for the Galaxy S20 in 2020, sales exceeded expectations significantly. Every brand they touched turned to gold. The documentary films they released, Burn the Stage in 2018, Bring the Soul in 2019, and Break the Silence in 2020, each broke box office records for concert films. Burn the Stage made $14 million in its opening weekend globally. These weren't just concerts on screen, they were cultural events. But here's what separates BTS from every other successful act: they changed the game for everyone else. Before BTS, K-pop had some international presence. Groups like Big Bang, 2NE1, and SNSD had fans outside Korea. But they were still considered niche. BTS proved that a non-English speaking act could dominate the global music industry. In 2020, their song Dynamite, their first full English track, became the first song by a Korean act to debut at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Not just chart, but debut at the top. It was downloaded and streamed over 800,000 times in its first week. But even before Dynamite, they had already made history with Korean language songs charting in the top 10. They proved that language wasn't a barrier if the emotion was universal. This opened the floodgates. Record labels around the world suddenly realized there was a massive untapped market for non-Western artists. K-pop agencies began receiving investment from major Western entertainment companies. Other K-pop groups like Blackpink, Twice, and Stray Kids found it easier to break into Western markets because BTS had already demolished the walls. The entire infrastructure changed. American radio stations that never played foreign language songs started adding K-pop to their playlists. Award shows that ignored Asian artists began creating categories and inviting K-pop acts. Spotify and Apple Music created dedicated K-pop playlists with millions of followers. Billboard changed how they calculated their charts to account for global streaming, partly because of BTS's dominance. BTS's impact on the Korean economy went far beyond direct revenue. Tourism to South Korea increased dramatically. In 2017, 1 in 13 tourists visiting South Korea cited BTS as their reason for visiting. Korean language learning apps saw subscription increases of hundreds of %. Demand for Korean beauty products, Korean fashion, Korean food, all exploded globally. The Korean government recognized this and appointed BTS as special presidential envoys for public diplomacy. They spoke at the United Nations 3 times, addressing topics from youth empowerment to sustainable development to anti-Asian racism. When they spoke at the 73rd UN General Assembly in 2018, it was watched by millions worldwide. These weren't just pop stars, they were cultural ambassadors reshaping how the world viewed South Korea and Asian artists in general. They challenged stereotypes. In Western media, Asian men were often portrayed as either kung fu masters or asexual comic relief. BTS shattered that. They were emotional, vulnerable, talented, and yes, incredibly attractive to millions of fans worldwide. They showed that Asian masculinity could be soft and strong simultaneously. The impact on the industry structure was equally revolutionary. The traditional K-pop trainee system had always been criticized for being exploitative. Young people signed contracts as teenagers, trained for years without guaranteed debut, and if they did debut, saw little of the profits. Companies took the majority of revenue. Big Hit Entertainment, watching BTS's success, pioneered a different model. In 2020, when Big Hit went public on the Korean Stock Exchange, they gave each BTS member company shares. By the end of the first trading day, each member's stake was worth $7.9 million. This was unprecedented. Idols becoming actual stakeholders in their own success. This forced other entertainment companies to reconsider their models. Newer agencies began offering better contracts, more creative control, and equity stakes to their artists. The balance of power was shifting. But then in 2022, something unexpected happened. BTS announced they would be taking a break from mandatory military service. In South Korea, all able-bodied men must serve approximately 18 to 21 months in the military. There had been discussions about exempting BTS due to their cultural contributions, similar to exemptions given to Olympic athletes and classical musicians, but BTS decided to serve. When the announcement was made, Big Hit stock, now called HYBE after a corporate restructuring, dropped 25% in a single day, wiping out approximately $1.5 billion in market value. The Korean music industry held its breath. HYBE had built a massive entertainment empire on the back of BTS's success, acquiring other labels, launching new groups, and expanding into different markets. But BTS had been responsible for 95% of their revenue at their peak. Could the company survive without them? Could K-pop maintain its momentum? Here's what's fascinating: even during their military hiatus, BTS continued to dominate. The members released solo projects that topped charts worldwide. J-Hope's solo tour Hope on the Stage in 2024 generated approximately 75.5 billion Korean won, roughly $60 million, accounting for 10% of HYBE's quarterly earnings from just one member's solo tour. The songs they had already released continued to stream billions of times. Dynamite remained one of the most streamed songs globally years after its release. Their 2017 song Spring Day became a symbol of longing for fans during the group's absence, consistently charting on Korean music platforms. The music industry also felt the absence. In 2024, Korean album sales decreased for the first time since 2015, when they had been growing consistently to over 100 million copies by 2023. Industry analysts directly attributed this decline to the absence of major artists like BTS, noting that when big artists release music, they create a trickle-down effect that boosts the entire market, helping new and mid-level idols gain attention. But HYBE learned to diversify. By 2024, while BTS had been HYBE's main revenue source at 95%, that percentage had dropped to below 20%. This wasn't because BTS earned less, but because HYBE successfully launched and promoted other acts like Tomorrow X Together, ENHYPEN, and New Jeans. The company's total revenue in 2024 reached $1.65 billion, a record. However, their operating profit dropped by 37.5%, directly tied to BTS's absence from group activities, specifically the lack of group concerts which had been massive revenue generators. As of early 2025, BTS members are completing their military service and preparing to return. Jin and J-Hope have already been discharged and resumed solo activities. The remaining 5 members are expected to complete their service by mid-2025, with the group planning a full reunion and comeback. Industry analysts are calling this the return of the king. Reuters reported that BTS's full return is expected to be a turning point leading to the recovery and global expansion of the K-pop industry. Stock market analysts are predicting HYBE's profits will recover significantly when BTS returns to full group activities, particularly concert tours which had generated hundreds of millions in revenue. So what's the final count? How much money did BTS actually make, and what did they change? According to combined reports from Forbes, Billboard, and Financial Disclosures, BTS generated approximately $170 million in peak annual revenue around 2019 through music, tours, merchandise, and endorsements. Their label Big Hit Entertainment reported $508 million in revenue that year, with BTS accounting for the vast majority. Over their career from 2013 to their hiatus in 2022, conservative estimates put BTS's total generated revenue in the multiple billions when accounting for album sales, touring, merchandise, endorsements, streaming, and multimedia projects. Their economic impact on South Korea alone was estimated at $4.65 billion in 2018, with continued contributions in subsequent years. More than 35 million albums sold worldwide, making them one of the best-selling music groups of all time. Multiple Billboard Hot 100 number ones. Billions of streams across all platforms. Sold-out stadium tours across 5 continents. But the money is just the scoreboard. What BTS changed was the entire structure of the global music industry. They proved that success doesn't require conforming to Western standards. They showed that authenticity and vulnerability could be more powerful than manufactured perfection. They demonstrated that fans treated as partners rather than consumers will move mountains for you. They opened doors for every non-Western artist who comes after them. Today, artists from Korea, Japan, Latin America, Africa, and everywhere else have a fighting chance at global success because BTS proved it was possible. They challenged industry gatekeepers who said you needed English lyrics, Western producers, and American radio play to make it big. They built their own path, and millions followed. K-pop is now a $12 billion industry and growing. Korean entertainment companies are among the most valuable in Asia. Korean culture influences fashion, beauty, food, and entertainment globally. And at the center of this cultural earthquake were 7 young men who just wanted to make music that mattered. When BTS returns in 2025, they're not returning to reclaim their throne, they never left it. Even during their absence, their influence remained dominant. They're returning to write the next chapter of a story that has already changed music history forever. So yes, BTS made $170 million in their peak year. But they created something far more valuable. They created a new paradigm for what global success could look like, and in doing so, they changed K-pop, and the entire music industry, forever. See you in the next video. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more K-pop analysis and content. Thanks so much for watching, and annyeong.